Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. All right, hello and welcome to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Glad to have you guys here. For those of you who are tuning in on YouTube, watching the video version of this, you will notice that we are not in my normal office. The big snowy background. I'll see if I can move out of the way so you can get a good view. Here we go, of what we got going on here. We're actually in. Let me readjust this mic here. There we go. We're in Telluride, Colorado. We came out here for our team retreat and had the team fly out or drive out. Some of them live in Colorado, so it was a pretty easy drive for some of them. I've actually been out here for a week. One of the things that we've always wanted, one of the dreams that we've always wanted in starting a business, my wife and I, was that we could travel around with the family a little bit more. And then we had kids and we were building the business, and the business wasn't at a place to do that for a long time. And then our kids got into school. We were in public school in California, and we just couldn't do it. The schools were getting mad at us for pulling our kids out and all of that stuff. So we tried to. And then now we're in Arizona. We're in a Montessori school, and they encourage us to give our kids experiences, and we absolutely love that. So I knew I was coming out here, and I just took the family with me and took the in-laws with us. And we were out here for a week just working and doing schoolwork and having fun and living life. So the last 2 days have been really interesting and really fun with the team and planning out our new business model, our new direction, our new evolution, all of that stuff. And so we're really excited. I'm personally really excited about this new direction we're headed. So for those of you who are wondering, like maybe you've had the thought of, hey, Brandon, I understand these messaging concepts. They're really awesome. I gain a lot from them, but how do we take the messaging and the communication and inject it into ads and webinars and sales mechanisms? Well, guess what? That's our next evolution. And so we've been doing a lot of workshops and a lot of planning and testing and tweaking with our messaging on this new direction. And it's been going really, really well. We've hired some mentors to help us with it. We had on the podcast down in Nicole Culver as well to help us with our high ticket evergreen process and just restructuring our program and our offers and stuff. So it's been a lot of work, but a lot of fun work. It feels like we're, almost starting another business. It's our next evolution and pivot. So what better place to do that than Telluride? I didn't realize this, but Telluride's actually a pretty spiritual area where the mountains actually represent the constellation Orion. And there's a lot of portals and vortexes here. And it's some people reference it as the city of light and a place of healing and where the masters come. And so I'm like, what better place to plan out our next evolution than Telluride? And I didn't know any of that when we picked this spot. So it was a nice, pleasant surprise. The energy here is unbelievable. The mountains here are extremely powerful. It almost feels like Sedona on steroids a little bit. It's different, but if you like Sedona, you definitely like Telluride. So yeah, it was really, really awesome. It's been an awesome time. In today's episode, what I wanted to talk about was this idea that everyone is replaceable. And we did like a mini clip or a short little version of this on our Instagram. It's just kind of testing out how that topic would land, how it would do before turning it into a full episode. And so it seemed to do pretty well. It seemed to resonate with people. But the main reason why I wanted to do this is I was on a hike out in Flagstaff, and it's starting to snow there as well. And I was trying to make it to the snow line and to do some sitting in silence. And I try to do that once a week. I try to make sure that I get out in nature, sit in silence, and I plan out content. And that's just what I do. So I was out there and I had this idea that I didn't realize the way I have been operating the last 4 years inside of my business is by this idea that everyone is replaceable, including you inside of your industry. And I never looked at it through that lens or that perspective before, but I realized that's what I was doing. When I was creating content, when I was figuring out our unique solution, when I was figuring out the problems that we solve, I was operating from this idea that everyone is replaceable, including you inside of your own industry. And if you don't step up, someone else will at some point. And the easiest way to be able to step up, stand out, and not be replaced inside of your space comes down to, in one word, it comes down to mastery. And that's where my focus has been over the last couple of years, is a focus of mastery. And so today on this episode, I wanted to talk about this concept of operating within your business, within your messaging, but also within your life, that everyone is replaceable. And this might be a little brutal. And some of you might be going like, okay, it's too much, but I don't really care because it is true. Everyone is replaceable, including you, and not just in your business, not just in your industry, but in your kid's life, in your marriage, in your relationships, in your friendships. Everyone is replaceable. And sometimes we start to take things for granted. We start to take our success for granted. We start to take our audience for granted, maybe our spouse or the relationship with our kids. And if we're not careful, you can be replaced, or relationships can get damaged, or audience can leave and things like that. But before I move any further, I want to make one thing very clear, is that in order to become not replaceable, it doesn't mean changing who you are. And I want to be very clear on that. It doesn't mean changing who you are so your friends like you more. It doesn't mean changing who you are so that your spouse likes you more. It's showing up as 100% of who you are and not slacking on showing up in the way that you want to show up. If you're a loving person, show up in a loving way as much as you can. Don't take that person for granted. Don't take that friendship for granted. Don't take that relationship for granted. Don't take your kids for granted. Especially with kids, you only have a limited amount of time. Like, I look at my son, Will, he's 8. And I built the business pretty much when he was born. That's when I started the business. And there are times I look at Will and I'm like, I can't believe he's 8. There are times when he's, 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't remember a lot of that stuff, but I do remember building the business. And I think back then it was necessary. But nowadays, what I do is every relationship that I have and friendship that I have, I'm asking myself, am I showing up 100% of who I am and how I want to show up? And if I'm not, I'm changing it. And that's true within the business as well. And it's true within our audience as well. There's times with our students, I'm like, am I showing up 100% of who I am and how, in order of my values? And sometimes the answer is no, and I have to go and correct that. So before we move any further, just wanted to drop that in there, that being replaceable doesn't mean changing who you are to be liked. What it means is showing up 100% of who you are, working towards those goals, following your dharma, following your passions, not being controlled by the external world, and living life by the values that you have as much as you can. I would say 100% of the time that's impossible. So, as much as you can. So what I wanted to talk about is we're going to move the conversation more to business and how to become not replaceable inside of business, or irreplaceable inside of business. And one of the things for me is, when I believe to my core in the way, and again, I only speak from experience. So from my experience, I have found that when I do my best work, I do things that stand out. It actually stems from my past experiences and honoring those experiences. And I think what starts to happen for a lot of people is that, like, if you're a leader, if you're an expert inside of your space, you have some sort of skill, you have some sort of knowledge. And the best form of that is usually from experience. Yes, education can play a role. Education can give you a deep foundation, but the example I always give is, if we have 100 medical students who just got a medical degree, and then we have their professor who's been practicing medicine for the last 30 years and working with thousands of patients. And we say, hey guys, go create content on this topic, this medical topic. The students are most likely going to be giving us the same content, the same information. But the doctor who has the experience is likely able to give us more depth, is able to understand problems better, emotions that people are going to be going through better. They understand situations better. It's why they're the professor, right? They have more experience. And so if you're an expert, focusing on that experience is what allows you, and developing more experience is what allows you to be irreplaceable. And I think a lot of people sometimes don't honor the experience they have. And when I say don't honor the experience you have, that means sometimes you're afraid to say the things that you know are true because it's going to be a little polarizing. You're afraid to stand against things that you realize don't necessarily work that well anymore. You're afraid of trying, a very bold headline or webinar topic because, again, you're afraid. So you're letting fear stop you from honoring the experience that you have and what your life has given you, what this universe has given you. And when we go another direction with it too, is like we're all here on this planet for a certain path. We're here to do a certain thing. We're here to, and I believe to my core that we've chose that before we came down here. And I think that's why you have some sort of internal driver of what you want to do and what you want to experience. And I think that if you want to become irreplaceable inside of your space, honoring that path you chose before you came down here is really important. And when we don't honor that path, we see a lot of disruption, distortion inside of our life. We may wake up unhappy every day going into a job that we hate. We may wake up every day working with students or clients that we don't like working with. We might wake up every day offering and fulfilling on a service that we don't like anymore. And I know from experience, when you're operating from a place of, I don't like to do this, but I'm only going to do it because it's comfortable and makes money, you actually start to become replaceable inside of the space because you're not following that passion. You're not following that purpose. And that following that passion, following that purpose leads to more mastery and more experience. So when we don't honor experience, we don't honor our dharma, we actually start to become replaced inside of the space. And I recognized that back in 2017 when I was teaching YouTube, and I was just like, this is not what I'm meant to do for the rest of my life. I could feel it to the core of my being. And I didn't honor that dharma. I didn't honor that path. I didn't honor the purpose because my purpose was shifting in that moment. And I resented the students, and I had no desire to explore more about learning how to use YouTube and develop my expertise. And so what started to happen is more competitors came into the space, and I didn't have a passion in what I was doing. Like, what do you think is going to happen? I'm going to get replaced. And my happiness level was so low that I took it upon myself at that point to go, okay, something needs to change. I need to honor this internal feeling of I don't enjoy this anymore, and I need to figure out what is this new direction. I need to honor the experience that I've had in my past, which is I've done plenty of pivots, and I should have known a pivot was necessary and required before I even made it. So I decided to honor that. And I started to look at, what do I have a lot of experience in? What is this new direction? What has my life gifted me? What have my failures gifted me? What has my experience gifted me that I can now turn into a product to help people in a way that I want to help people? And to be honest with you guys, we're actually going through this again right now. We're going through another evolution. And the way I look at this is, I also do a lot of deep spiritual and self-development work. I do work with shaman Don Javier, and a lot of what I teach you guys, I actually get in the form of downloads. And that's why silence is so important to me. And when I get downloads, or I get ideas, or I get scripts that come into my head, or I just get pumped up on things, I know that's the universe. It's a higher source. It's something beyond me giving me a gift. And I've realized the more that I honor those gifts, the more successful I become, the more I'm able to stand out, the more unique I am in the marketplace. And so again, I keep using the word honor, but that's really what it is. And when we're not honoring all those things, that's when we start to see, again, distortion, disruption, and things in our life. So with that being said, I kind of wanted to share a couple stories here to kind of bring this full circle. And then I'm actually going to give you 3 areas to focus on that I think will help you not be replaced inside of your space. Okay. So I think the first one that I want to talk about is Blockbuster and Netflix. And we all know this story, but I kind of want to give a little depth to what was really going on. We all know that Netflix came in and basically put Blockbuster out of business. Like, we all know that, but let's look at what really had happened there. So Blockbuster, obviously, was a video rental company. For those of you for the one person listening who may not know what Blockbuster is, was a video rental company, and you could go and rent videos like DVDs and VHS tapes and stuff like that. I mean, I remember as a kid, like Friday night, school's done, load up in the car, you drive the Blockbuster, you look for the new releases, and you rent a movie, and you come home and you watch that movie, and hopefully that those new releases are in stock. And if they're not, you go up to the counter and like, has anyone returned this yet? And even me as a kid, I remember just like the number one movie coming out and wasn't there. And then while you're there with your parents, you would watch the people dropping DVDs off, and you'd keep running to the counter. Was it this one? Was it this one? Because they wouldn't order enough copies on these new releases. Such a foreign concept nowadays where everything's on demand, but that's the way it was. So when I was in college, so I must have been 21, 20, so in my early 20s, Netflix first came out. And Netflix came out as a DVD rental company, but their whole thing is there's no late fees. So you can keep the DVDs as long as you want, which Blockbuster never did. Blockbuster was always like, return it or you're going to get late fees. And it was a mail service. So you didn't even have to drive anywhere. They would just mail it to you, keep it as long as you want. It was a really interesting concept, and it was really popular. It took off. But what most people don't know is that model was actually a failing business model. It was a model that didn't work, and it wasn't profitable. The founders of Netflix had done all the right things, right? They like mapped it all out, did the profitability charts. They look at all the costs, and they're like, it should be profitable, but it wasn't profitable. It was a losing business model. But it was right off the bat a competitor of Blockbuster. And so when I look at those two companies at that moment in time, I look at Blockbuster as someone who became very comfortable, didn't think that anyone would disrupt their space. They basically didn't want to evolve. They didn't want to focus on mastery. They didn't want to gain more experience. They didn't want to honor the space in the industry. They weren't looking for that type of thing. They had a very good thing going, and it was great and fine. Well, Netflix comes in, starts to disrupt them. But where I want to go with this is what we have to look at is what Netflix was doing. They were gaining more experience. They were focusing on mastery of their craft, and their craft being movie delivery, right? So they're shifting the way that movies were consumed, watched, and how the rental space worked. Well, that was a failing business model. And so what they did is they started to evolve, and they eventually went to the streaming model. And so when you focus on mastery, you focus on experience, you focus on being the best in your of your craft, you start to discover things that other people haven't discovered yet. And when you discover things that other people haven't discovered yet, you can teach things that other people haven't taught yet, and you can offer things that other people haven't offered yet. And so anytime I get a download or something hits me, I want to take action on it because it's going to gift, even if it doesn't work out the way I think it will or want it to, it's going to gift me more experience, more lessons. I'm going to become more aware of emotions that maybe my audience will feel at some point. I now gained a mistake that doesn't work, then I can use that in my messaging. So big piece of messaging is understanding the mistakes that people make. So I'm like, the more mistakes I make, great, because I know down the road, that's going to be a huge gift from a messaging perspective. And so the focus of mastery is so important. And so that's what Netflix did. And they created the streaming model, and they were able to offer something that no one else offered before. And they thrived. I mean, they finally found a proven, profitable, they proved it, but it was a profitable business model. And Blockbuster still wasn't catching up. And so now Blockbuster is gaining less market share. But here's what started to happen is the streaming services started to take off. So then Hulu popped up, Disney Plus popped up. So Netflix was the leader. They were the one leading the space. They were starting to replace a lot of companies inside of the space, and some companies evolved with them. But the thing is with mastery is that when you're the leader, what you're doing is you're paving a new way. You're creating a new space, and that's exactly what Netflix did. And that's exactly how I look at what I do here. I don't give a crap what someone else is teaching. People ask me, how do you compare to X, Y, and Z or this person, or how does this? I'm like, I literally don't know because I don't pay attention to what anyone else is doing. I'm looking at how do I improve and help as many people as I can? How do I gain more mastery? How do I understand the space better? How do I identify what's not working that people haven't realized yet? And that's where I spend most of my time. But what starts to happen is when you become the person changing the space, the change you make becomes a norm. And that's how industries get revolutionized. That's how society grows is there's leaders that create something new, that newness becomes normal, and then that becomes what is your industry or society or norms. And so I'm looking at how do I create new norms inside of my space? And that's what Netflix did. But you have to understand is when you're evolving and you're creating and it does become a norm, everyone else starts to do that. And when I look at what we do, like thought reversals are becoming a lot more well known. There's people that aren't even in our programs that know what a thought reversal is, that use thought reversals. It's becoming a staple. Slowly but surely, it's becoming a staple piece of content that people inside of our space use. And it's something that I created 4 or 5 years ago. And so Netflix did the same thing. They created the streaming realm. People came on. So Netflix needed to evolve again. And so what Netflix did is they eventually evolved to becoming more of like a production house. And so they started to create their own Netflix originals. So yes, they're still streaming, but they now have their own things that you can only get on Netflix. And so now people are flooding over to Netflix. And I think by this point, Blockbuster's already done and gone. But now they're just competing with, things like Hulu and Amazon Prime Video and Disney Plus and all of those streaming sites. So they started to stream their own things because, it was a difficult process with all the licensing that you have to do. So they had to license all these shows and they didn't have control over everything. And shows like The Office were getting removed because is it NBC or ABC or I think it's NBC started Peacock and moved it all over there. So they started to take control and evolve. And then guess what happened? Everyone else started creating their own originals. Like Disney already had it, but a lot of originals, because obviously that's how they started. But we have like HBO originals and we have Amazon Prime and Hulu originals now and all of that stuff. And now Netflix is at a very unique spot because there needs to be some sort of evolution or something to happen next. And I don't think they've uncovered it quite yet. But the point of the story here is that if you don't want to be replaceable inside of this space, you have to honor your past experience. You have to honor the mastery. You have to honor the failures that you're going through. You have to move past the fear to give honor to that. You have to honor the downloads that you get. You have to honor your dharma. You have to honor all of that stuff. And when you do, you start to revolutionize your space. You start to stand out. You start to become a little bit different. And there's 3 areas that I like to focus on. And it's 3 areas that I focus on and we have our students focus on. So if you're an NGM student, you're probably familiar with this. But there's 3 areas that I like to focus on. And I feel like when we have these 3 areas functioning and working, it becomes very difficult to become replaceable inside of your space. And these 3 areas are number 1, experience, number 2, dharma, and number 3, improving change. So I want to dive into each one and explain them a little bit further. So Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book and has this theory called the 10,000 hour theory. And the 10,000 hour theory is that when you put in 10,000 hours of doing a certain task or working in a certain industry or doing something, you reach this level where it becomes very difficult and hard for someone to pass you. And he has this and a ton of examples ranging from like Bill Gates all the way to Wayne Gretzky, things like saying that Bill Gates, obviously he's very smart and kind of a genius in what he does. But his theory is that he has that skill, but he also was one of the very first people on this planet to have access to a computer. And he was able to put in more hours on that computer than everyone else. And he got to that 10,000 mark faster. And because of that, he had a certain level of mastery over everyone else. Same thing with Wayne Gretzky. And he actually, it's very interesting. He breaks down inside the book that hockey players born in a certain month of the year or a couple months of the year, which I think was the beginning of the year, tended to be some of the best hockey players out there. And the reason why is because the way their birthday fell, they were able to get more playing time in the leagues and things like that because of different age cutoffs and whatnot. I can't remember the specific details of it, but he was saying that they would get more playing time. And because they got more playing time, they were able to hit that 10,000 hour mark faster. And so for me, the very first pillar of mastery is experience. Like if you're not willing to try, to practice, to work on your craft, to master your craft, to put in the hours, like you're just not going to stand out inside of your space. You're going to become replaceable very easily. And the reason why is because you're the only form of content and communication you can put out when you're not focusing on your craft is only things you learn from other people, which means education. So the only thing you can teach is your education. You can only teach your certifications, what you learn from education, your certifications, your degrees, and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. But the problem is that everyone else is going to be able to get the same degree and the same certification. So when you're competing with 1,000 people who all have the same education as you, how are you expecting to stand out? Because the only thing you can create content from is your education, but you have the same education as 10,000 other people. So it's like almost impossible to be able to stand out. The only thing that's going to allow you to master your craft is experience. And, I personally don't like formal education. I hated school, dropped out of college. Like when I read a book, it's very rare if I actually finish the book. I love learning from experience, and that's one of my strengths, but also one of my weaknesses. I think one of my biggest strengths is that I just take action really quick, and I just move forward really quick. I put things out really quick, but also it is one I am aware it is also one of my weaknesses because there's a huge amount of value in learning from other people's experiences, combining it with yours, and so I am aware of that. But the point here is that you do need experience, and the person who has more experience, more failures, has a deeper understanding of the people they're trying to communicate with. You also have a deeper understanding of a solution. You're the type of person, when you have a ton of experience and mastery over your craft, you're the type of person who doesn't have just one solution to a problem, you have 10, because you figured out multiple ways to fix the problem. And so that's kind of pillar number one of mastery is you do need experience. You do need to go out and do something. You need to put in those 10,000 hours with your craft. But here's the second pillar that Malcolm doesn't really talk about inside of his book, but from my own experience, I realize is really powerful, is dharma, which is the same. In my definition of dharma is essentially your purpose in this moment in time. So I believe that your purpose will change over time. I think right now in this moment, you have a certain purpose, and as you gain more experience, it's going to bring you more awareness, and then your purpose will change over time. But listening to that, being in alignment, following your dharma is another thing you need to be able to stand out in your space, to become irreplaceable. And here's the example I always give, is that if we focus just on gaining 10,000 hours in something, but we don't actually like it, my personal belief is that we will never have mastery in that. And here's the reason. Here's an example. As a kid, I hated soccer. I loved sports. I loved almost every sport, but soccer just wasn't my thing. I didn't like it. I was the kid in the field who was like picking flowers as the ball went flying past, my parents screaming at me, "Brandon, get the ball, get the ball." And I'm like, what? Huh? That was me. So it wasn't a passion of mine. I didn't have any internal desire, demand to want to be better at soccer. And if I was to put 10,000 hours into playing soccer, and there's someone who loves soccer, was naturally gifted and great at soccer, and they put in the same amount of hours, I will never be able to compete with them. Even if they put in 5,000 hours of practice and I put in 10,000 hours, I believe that person would still be better than me. And so when we don't listen to our purpose, we don't listen to the things we don't like, we don't listen when it's time for a pivot, you're basically swimming uphill or up the river, no matter how many hours you put in. And so there has to be some sort of passion, natural skill, natural gift, again, what I call dharma. So we have to combine our dharma and our purpose with putting in the 10,000 hours. But there's also one more pillar and one more thing we have to look at. If you really want to become irreplaceable inside of your space, you have to have a focus on what I call improving change. And what that means is that you have to look at your space and identify what doesn't work anymore and how do I fix it. And I believe to my core that when you have 10,000 hours or focus of gaining more experience, which also, by the way, means more failures, combine that with being in a field or an industry or doing what you love, following your dharma, combined with this idea of looking for ways to improve the space. And that doesn't mean figuring out a better way. Sometimes it means just identifying what doesn't work anymore and getting people to stop doing what doesn't work anymore, like what's outdated. And improving on what's outdated is a really good way to go. And I realized that I've been doing that without realizing I was doing it for the last 4 years when we started the Video Forex Effect, and then New Generation Mastery, and now New Generation Mastery Plus, which is going to have a focus of sales and strategy and webinars and all that stuff. That's what I've been doing. Is I've been, number one, putting in the hours, putting in a lot of experience, moving quickly, testing with my own company, following my own passion, what I love doing in this moment. I know that's going to shift over time, but right now I love teaching messaging and communication and the subconscious and everything that I'm doing. I also have a feeling that there's something more coming pretty soon, and I'm waiting for it to happen. But in this moment, I am following my dharma. And one of the biggest things I look at is what doesn't work anymore that people are unaware of, and how do I improve it? And I've had all three of those things, and we've grown really fast. We've stood out. I believe we have become irreplaceable in this moment in time. That can change at any moment. But I feel like we're talking about messaging in a way, and content and communication in a way that no one else is in our space. And it comes from, number one, experience. Number two, it's my dharma. And number three, we're just getting people to stop doing things that don't work anymore and providing a few different options of which way to go. And I would say that we have mastery, a certain level of mastery over our craft. And so my challenge to you, and what I want to leave you guys with, is looking at those three areas. Do you have mastery in your craft? Are you irreplaceable inside of your space right now? And if the answer is no, then look at those three areas, because I guarantee you one or more of those areas are off right now. If you don't feel like you stand out, you don't feel like you're unique, you don't feel like you might be replaceable inside of your space, look at those three areas. Are you looking for improving change? And improving change doesn't just mean I have a better solution, I'm different, look at me. It means being able to look at what's there, identify why it doesn't work, or what doesn't work, and also understanding why it doesn't work and providing a solution from that space. So look at that. Do you have the experience? Are you going out making mistakes? Are you trying and are you moving quickly? Are you putting things out? And by the way, that's a huge focus in our program. Like, I don't want to sit down with you and script the perfect one video when you're in our program, because it's a trial and error. You're going to have to test and tweak and see. You're going to have to go and test things, put out new styles of content, try a video, try a live, try an image, try this topic, try that topic, try this communication pattern. It's trial and error. And you need that. You need that experience. So again, ask yourself, do you have the experience? Are you doing trial and error? Are you embracing mistakes? The next one, are you looking for improving change? Are you identifying what's outdated and doesn't work? Are you looking for what is causing people problems because they think that's the right way and when it's not? And number three, are you actually following your dharma and your passion? Do you wake up every day going like, I'm so stoked and excited to be talking about this, to be doing this? Or is there some sort of internal thing going on where you're like, I don't really like this anymore. It's time for a change. And if that is you, are you letting fear control the actions you take? Because if you are, it might be time to adjust that, to change that. And I promise you, based off my own experience and the experience of our students, when all three of these are working, it becomes very difficult to become replaceable inside of your space. So if you love this episode, let me know. Leave me a comment or a review over on iTunes. I absolutely love reading your guys' reviews, and obviously it helps us get more eyeballs on our stuff to help more people and to serve you guys better. So leave us a review over on iTunes, and thank you for listening or watching, depending on where you're consuming this. So that's it. I'll see you guys next week. Take care, everyone. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.